What's going on, guys? My name is Matthew and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video, we're going to go over how to use Dehancer Film Emulation within Adobe Premiere Pro. Let's dive in. Alright guys, so let's go on ahead and dive in here into Adobe Premiere Pro. I went ahead and put in piece of footage that I shot over here in Long Beach, and on top of that I placed an adjustment layer. Now we're going to use the adjustment layer to place our effects from Dehancer. Now how exactly do we do that? Well, if we go over here to effects, go down here to video effects, scroll down and click on Film Emulation, Dehancer Pro, and then we're going to drag and drop right here. You can also use the search bar right up here in case you don't want to go through the pain, for lack of a better term, of trying to find where the plugin actually is. Now what we'll do is we'll go over to Effects Controls. Now over here we can see Dehancer Pro v7.3. That's the version that I have right now. And you'll scroll down here and you'll see several different options that you can play with. I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but know that there's plenty you can do with it, and that's what's really cool about this plugin. So let's start up here with Input. Now under Input, you'll see right here under the source a couple of different profiles you can select from, and these options correlate with the color profile of your footage. So Rec. 709, very common, most likely the one you would choose. However, you have a few different options beyond that. You can choose Rec. 2020 if you have footage of higher dynamic range. You can select ACES if you're working within the Academy Awards color space. There's also DVR WG Rec. 709, DVR WG Intermediate, Cine and Film Log, and you can choose your own camera too. Let's go ahead and choose camera. And then you'll see over here, beneath the source, some more options for camera. And you can see as you scroll down, there are plenty of options here. Right? So much you can play with. So for example, if you had footage from your iPhone and you happen to shoot it in log, you can select that and it would create a certain look. Now in this case, it wouldn't work because I shot on a Sony a7 IV, but you can go ahead and play with them anyway. I mean, each and every one of these creates a different kind of look, and you can experiment with it. Now, as you go down here, you can see there are options for the a7 IV. Unfortunately, though, I did not shoot in S-Log. I shot in Rec. 709. So in my case, I wouldn't even choose a camera, and I would just go over here to the Rec. 709 option. But if we go back and just kind of click through, so what if we went with a Canon C-Log neutral? Or further down, we can choose Fujifilm. Or maybe we go down here and select this. The options are really endless, and it's pretty cool that you have so many different options you can play with, so many ways to manipulate your footage. For now, I'll just go with Rec. 709. Now down here, you can also play with the temperature comp. So if we move it to the right, it gets a little warmer. If we move it to the left, it gets a little cooler. Those blues really start to pop out here. So that's pretty cool. You can also play with the tint comp. So move it to the right, you can see more of those pinks. Move it to the left, some more of those greens. And you could also play with the defringe over here. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Now let's go down here to film. Now this film tab serves more as a LUT. So if you go up here into the creative tab under lumetri color, You can select a bunch of different LUTs, and this is already included in your Premiere Pro. But going back here, this kind of serves in a similar fashion. So if we enable it, click on that check mark if it's not clicked, you can just go through and see what really flows, what really works for you. So what if I went up here with Fuji Eterna? Creates this kind of a look. What if I go down to here, Kodak Gold? Subtle difference, a little warmer. Now, what if we go down here to Lomachrome Metropolis? That's interesting. What's more, you can push and pull the profile that you choose. Just like that. I'm going to hit this check mark and not use a film profile for now. But definitely play with it. Check it out. There's a lot of different cool options that you can play with. I'll jump down over here to print. I'll enable it. And you can play with a few different profiles here. So you can choose linear, the film log, print film options over here, glossy paper. What happens if I click that? Pretty interesting, right? Kind of increases the contrast in the image. You can play with the exposure a bit, bring it up, or bringing it down. I kind of like bringing it down more, really bringing out those dark tones in the image. And you can even play with the contrast. That really brings out those dark tones if I crank it up. And the other direction brightens the image. I'm going to put it over here somewhere. Right there. That looks good. Additionally, you can also play with the color density and the saturation, but for now, I'll leave it as is. Now going down here, let's take a look at film grain. So if you enable the film grain, it'll create these little artifacts that you can see a little more prevalently over here in the sky. The further down you go with the millimeter, the more prevalent your grain will be. So if I just go ahead and play it, it's very subtle, but you can see the grain all around the image. If I went ahead and chose, say, 65, and played it out, you can kind of see that it's still there, but it's very subtle. Now, maybe that's the look you're going for, but if you want something that's a little more obvious, something that's a little more prevalent, I would definitely recommend going closer to 8. Now, another thing you can play with is the halation. If you go ahead, click here, enable the effect, check out what it does with the highlights, the city lights in the image. They really start to pop out and they kind of have this reddish look. It's pretty interesting. What's more is you can also click here and select different halation profiles. So if I go over here to 8mm Super 8, for example, that really brings out those reds. If I go back and go with perhaps a 65mm or 70mm option, it's still there, but it's definitely a lot more subtle. And for the image that I'm creating here, this is a look that I prefer. Now let's go down here to bloom. And you guys, this might be my favorite part of Dehancer in Premiere. If you click enable, it's very subtle, but it blurs out the highlights, the city lights in the image. If we go to 8mm, it looks a little more feathered. Jump up to 65. It's still there, but it's subtle. I'm going to keep it here at 16. I really like the way this is starting to look now. Let's jump down here to film damage. click Enable, go ahead and play it, and notice these artifacts that you see on the screen. It really kind of gives it like a retro look. So if you're trying to create something that's old time, old fashioned, something like those VHS tapes of old, it's pretty cool. Once again, you have a few different options here. So you can choose 8mm, 16mm, 65, 35. If you go closer to 8, those artifacts become a little more prevalent. I kind of like the look, so I'm going to keep that. Now let's take a look at Vignette. If we click here and enable it, and play with the settings, it kind of creates a look around the edges a bit. So further down, a little darker, further up, definitely brighter. You can play with the size as well, the feathering, and so forth. Now, in my opinion, I don't see this as very much different to the Vignette tool of Lumetri Color. I tend to think this is a little simpler, a little more streamlined. But that being said, maybe you do prefer it. And it's definitely worth playing around with. Now, another thing we can do is if we go down here and click on Monitor and click False Color, you can really kind of take a look at your image using this chart here and figure out which colors are kind of clipping. Now, I'm not going to mess around with this too much, but if you're a color grader or if you're color grading, this might be a very useful tool to use. Now, the last thing I'll quickly go over here is the LUT generator. Once you create the look that you're going for, you can export what you created as a LUT. And for future use, you can go up here to Creative and drop in the LUT that you make. You could also use it on DaVinci Resolve or any other NLE software for video editing. Pretty cool. And that's how you use Dehancer within Premiere Pro. All in all, I think it's a pretty cool tool. It definitely has its pros and cons. As far as pros go, I would say, look, it's very intuitive. I would compare this to softwares like New Blue Effects or Red Giant. I find it to be very intuitive. It runs pretty smoothly when putting it in Premiere. And I know with New Blue and with Red Giant, sometimes it can be a bit of a struggle, with slow playback, things of that nature. So from that standpoint, I love how well Dehancer runs within Premiere. Another good thing that I like about it is the variety of film profiles and the flexibility with which you have. So whether you're changing the strength of the profile, the hue, the saturation, things like that, I really like that as well. And what's more, I just really, in particular, like the film damage and the bloom tools within Dehancer. I think it creates such a unique look. I love that you can just simply add that and really change the texture of your image. And I also like the fact that you can export it as a LUT and just save it for another time where that particular profile that you created could come to use. With that being said, I do think there are a couple of cons, and one of those being the Vignette tool. I personally don't think it's the best out there. It's not very intuitive compared to other tools within here. And quite frankly, I just prefer the Vignette tool that Adobe has on its own. I think it's a little simpler to use. I think it's more effective. Yes, maybe you have more detail within Vignette and Dehancer, but for me, I'm not trying to do anything crazy. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel when I'm applying a Vignette. So I definitely prefer it in Adobe versus Dehancer. And the other con I would say is the cost. There are other comparable plugins out there that are cheaper, like a New Blue, like a Red Giant. However, if you use my promo code SOULE10, SOULE 10, and you go forward with a purchase, it can definitely save you some money. And once you apply that promo code, And I'm not just saying this to plug myself in here, but once you apply that kind of a promo code, it can save you a lot of money. And once you have it, I think you guys will love it all in all. So definitely give it a look. So that's the tutorial. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to click the like button, subscribe to my channel to get more content just like this, and write some comments down below. See if you have any thoughts on how Dehancer works within Premiere Pro. I would love to hear what you guys think. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.